Jon, what's up, man? So good to see you. It's been what, almost seven
6 years.
years?
Yeah. Well, the time is different with COVID. There's like pre-COVID and post-COVID. And I remember talking to you before. So you were before. That's what I
I
think of.
didn't, and the interesting thing about COVID is I didn't skip a beat with COVID. I'm like, nah, I'm not doing this. I did 10 days into COVID. I'm like, no, I get it. I know what we're
Yeah.
doing here. And I just
Yeah.
kept rolling. And a lot of what we do is virtual anyways. So fortunately, I was ahead of the times, I guess.
Yeah. My stuff I turned into virtual events. So I just had to kind of pivot pretty quickly to be like, all right, let's figure out a studio. Let's, what is this? Because a lot of events were like, I had the best year coming up. And then it was like, and all went on pause and I had to do that, pivot to virtual. So yeah, we were just talking before we started. I can't wait to hang out with you in Salt Lake if I get out there again.
Yeah, man. Let me know. Are live events? Do you enjoy that the most? Do you enjoy
Oh,
doing
I
things
love it.
live? Is that
I love
okay?
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I get to sit in 50 of the best classrooms in the world every year and I get to learn and then bring that forward. So like when I go speak to Range Rover, I go, oh my gosh, they're doing this. And then I get to bring it to the next client and the next client. And so it becomes this rolling
Mm.
education for me. And so I feel real fortunate that that's part of my career.
Is that like how long have you been doing that? Because I know you've been in the game for a long time, and obviously you've been doing public speaking and writing books. I mean, I had you on almost 7 years ago,
Yeah.
and even before that, you were writing books with the Ramsey team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm really curious about your path with the corporate route because you talk about a company like Range Rover, for example. I
Yeah.
mean, these are big organizations you're working with.
Mhm. Yeah. So the fortunate thing for me was I had big brand experience when I was in marketing. So I was a journalism major, started working in advertising, and then really started focusing on corporate. So I worked in-house at like Home Depot and Bose and Staples. So I had this really fun experience of going, oh, here's how big brands function. Here's the dynamics. And then I started my own business about 10 years. And that's when corporate really started to grow for me, where I said, okay, that's what I want to lean to. I try to write books that can live in a corporate event space, but also an individual reader. So somebody, whether you're a dude that just wants to read a book that challenges you about your mindset or goals, you can read it. If you're an event planner that's like, we want our sales team to crush this year, you feel good about bringing the content in there too. So I consider those kind of my two audiences. But at the end of the day, I really believe that like people are people are people. And if I can speak to the heart of an issue, I can talk to Range Rover one day and the National Propane Gas Alliance the next day, and the next day can be a men's conference, and the next day. And so like if I can find that commonality, there's really not a limit to where I get to go.
I love the way you write. I remember early on in my career, specifically with what we're doing here in Order of Man, which is 2015. That was probably about the time that you came out with, was a do-over at about that time,
Yeah,
2015,
do over
2016.
would have been there. Yeah, and finish came out I think in 16. So do over and finish were kind of the like back to back almost.
There is one video, I mean, the fact that I can remember it 6 years later that really resonated with me. You talked about the different stages of life. You did a video and you talked about
Oh
different
yeah,
stages of life. Do you remember that?
yeah. Yeah, so it was about editing and when you're guiding and you're
Yes.
just trying to figure it out. Yeah. So what I love to like my favorite thing to do from a content perspective is take really complex kind of tangled things and put some order to them and go, hey, here's a way to think about it. Here's a framework. I sometimes say my job's I'm a handle maker. Like we have enough ideas. We have more than enough ideas. We don't have handles on them to pick them up and take them into our own lives. And so I try to say, how can I put a handle on this idea? So how can I take the phases of life and go, okay, this is what editing looks like. This is what mastery looks like. This is what guiding looks like. And that's what I was trying to do in that video.
I think that's powerful because, and I wholeheartedly agree with you about no new information. I mean, there's really new ways to present old information,
Mhm.
and some is going to resonate more than others. It might be you, it might be Peterson, it might be Jocko, it might be any number of guys that we've had on the podcast or haven't had on the podcast. And I think the thing that I've found is, and I tell the guys as we present information to them, this is not new information I'm presenting to these guys.
Yeah.
It's information that we can consume. It's consumable,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's only consumable to a certain amount of people. Other people are like, nah, I don't like that guy. And they're more than vocal about telling me that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But my thing there is that you're 100% right. Like I've been listening to a lot of the classics from like the 50s and the 40s on motivation, on goals. And you can hear current people riffing on those. They might not even know, like it's just in the ether. And so, but like that stuff where I go, oh, Earl Nightingale. Like I was listening to an Earl Nightingale audio the other day, and he said, call your problems projects. And I was like, come on, dude. Like that is, because I don't like when people go, call your problems opportunities. That gap is really far for me mentally. And it feels a little Pollyanna. But dude, calling a problem a project, I can get on board with that. And then I can go, okay, dude, I can crush a project. What does that look like? But that was an audio from like the 40s. And then, so like, I 100% agree with that. And then the consumer, like, as far as some people are going to like it and some aren't, I think that's often the sign of you figured out your audience. Like it's, there's a, like, my stuff, I love goal nerds. Like if you came to me and were like, I hate goals. I think goals are dumb. I don't want to do goals. Tell me why I should do goals. I'd be like, look, we're a long way from each other. So like, I'm going to go over here and help these people that are already like, they're already doing goals. Like I don't need to talk you into a goal. So like, that's where, when I get to talk to an audience, like real estate agents or insurance folks, or like folks that are hustling, they're like, we dare you to keep up with us. I don't have to try to convince them like, hey, if you hustle a little, if you're intentional about what time you go to bed, like they're already doing that. They're like, give us something else. Let's go. Those are my people. And that's where I really get to have fun with people.
I'm glad we're talking about that, because when I knew we were going to have a conversation, I'm like, oh, here we go, another goal book, more goal information, and I don't think that's the void. There's so much information out there, like we've already been talking about. So, what is it about the systems that you've identified or the handle that you're making that makes this a better handle or something that's easier to consume or easier to apply in a man's life?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing, like chapter 2, if you read chapter 2 and actually do the exercise, like it will wildly change your outlook. And so in chapter 2, I talk about what I call a best moments list. And so a best moments list is exactly what it sounds like. You take a piece of paper, you write best moments, and you write down the best moments you've experienced over the last 5, 10, 20 years. And why that's powerful is it's the opposite of everything our culture teaches us. Our culture is addicted to sadness and addicted to trauma. So every counseling experience I've ever had, we spend the first 10 sessions going over the worst things that's ever happened to me. Every couple small group I've been in where we tell our stories as a couple, it ends up being a cry festival. Here's the worst things that have happened. I was in a men's group. We drew trauma eggs, a big egg of all the traumatic things that have happened to us. I never once had somebody go, let's explore the things that have given you the deepest joy and deepest satisfaction as a man over the last 10 years. Like, let's highlight those, as if you can't learn from joy. Like right now, for every 100 scientific papers written on sadness, there's only one written on joy. 100 on sadness, one on joy. So you do this best moments list and it turns on so many things in you. Number one, you experience gratitude. Everybody always goes, oh, you got to be grateful. Yeah, agreed. How do I do that? Well, when you write down the things that you've experienced joy with in the last 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, you automatically go, wow, I'm grateful for things I'd forgotten about. Number two, it teaches you self-awareness. No man gets to change his life without self-awareness. The man who gets fired for anger issues thought he was passionate. He goes, I had no idea. Like, no, you didn't have self-awareness, how you were really coming across. It teaches you self-awareness. And it also flips the switch where when you create this list, you automatically go, I want more of that. Instead of trying to go figure out a life vision for the next 20 years, which a lot of men have a hard time with, it's like, imagine 20 years, what you'll be doing from now. Like it's this blank piece of paper. It's overwhelming. You go, what are the things that light you up? And then how do you add more of those into your tomorrow? And then your next month and your next year, and it becomes this really fun life plan. So for me, that was one of the biggest differences in this approach, is that it goes here, instead of saying, you have to know exactly where you're headed a year from now. A friend of mine spent 6 months trying to figure out his why. Didn't change anything. Didn't do anything different. Was like, as soon as I know my why, man, I'm going to really get into gear. Yeah. It says, hey, no, let's understand. Like, because we always go, don't look in the rearview mirror. You're not going that way. Don't learn from what I'm good at and what lights me up and what gives me fuel and passion. And it really becomes this life plan that's so easy to do and so instructive. And it's based on you, not this fictional version of you that you think should exist.
Man, I have so much to go off this. Number one is the vision thing. It's interesting when I hear people say, well, here's the thing. People ask me, hey, what's your vision for Order Man in 5 years? I'm like, bro, I don't even know what I'm going to have for dinner tonight.
Yeah,
Like I do
exactly.
not know what I'm
Yeah.
gonna I gotta make a
No.
list here after I'm done to feed my kids,
Yeah.
let alone what I'm gonna be doing I know the direction, I know the heading, but I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what that looks like. The other thing is self-awareness. I think this is huge because I thought I was self-aware. I've been in this business for 8 years now, and I was doing financial planning before. I went through a divorce in the past year, and when she told me she wanted a divorce, bro, I was shocked,
Hmm.
completely shocked. I'm like, wait, what? I was speechless because I thought that things were okay. I knew there were some struggles and some pain points and things we needed to work on, but I was completely shocked, and it showed me that I was just not aware of what in the hell was happening in my life.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of men that are in that spot. And so I always say like self-awareness is a superpower. Like it is like the man who's out of shape, whose doctor says you need to lose 50 pounds is often shocked because they haven't been self-aware about the choices they're making. And so it's this really, I like to have kind of sloped on ramps to challenging things. So it's challenging to go figure out your next 5 years. Like, I don't like that. That cripples me. It's overwhelming. It's a nice on ramp where I go, okay, I've made this list. Here's the things. And then what happens is there's these categories, there's 4 categories that jump out of the list that you automatically go, wow, there's accomplishments, there's experiences, there's relationships, and there's objects. Everything you put on that list will fit in one of those 4 things. And here's the difference. If you go on a hike, you live in Utah, there's lots of hiking. If you go on a hike in Utah and you love that, that was an experience. If you go on a hike with a friend who's going through a divorce, you have a friend that's going to come to you and say, hey, man, I'm in a similar situation. I need some feedback. You go on that hike with that friend, that's a relationship moment. You hike it faster than you've ever hiked it. That's an accomplishment moment. You pick up a rock or a pine cone from the top to remind yourself you can do hard things. That's an object. So the first thing is you create the list and then you categorize it and you talk about a eureka moment. All of a sudden you go, 80% of my items were relationship. That's what matters to me. And I haven't been pouring into people. No wonder I feel like I'm stuck. No, like I'm built for relationship. I haven't been spending time on it. Or you go, accomplishments are what I care about the most. But in my family, success was seen as bad, or like it was greedy and I've been pulling back and I've been self-sabotaging. Oh, no wonder. So it just becomes this really clear picture of who you are and who you were designed to be. That's really fun to live out of. That to me, because I think you're right. Like you hear like, oh, there's another book about goals. I'm sure you weren't like, oh, finally, I hadn't heard anybody talk about goals. Like
No,
the
I just
thing that
like you.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, I
exactly.
like
Yeah.
Jon. I like what he has to
Yeah.
share. I don't know about this book, but I know I
Yeah.
like Jon. So let's figure out what this is about.
My version of that is when people go, I don't like the word goals. And I go, what do you like instead? They go, intentions. Oh, okay. That's just
Fine.
like, or they go, I don't like goals. I like habits. I go, cool. And then they describe like, I don't care what word you use if your life is changing and growing in the way you want it to change. I really like it's vocabulary. So, but for me, the best moments list is, I think, the difference maker in the way I'm talking about this topic.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, if I'm understanding you correctly with those 4 categories, so we have accomplishments, experiences, relationships, and objects. You're saying that each individual is built to navigate just naturally towards one, maybe over the others. I'm sure we like all things. I like experiences. I just got back from Scotland, and Springdale and southern Utah. And I also like things. I like to buy technology. I like my
Yeah.
cell phone. But you're saying we naturally gravitate towards one over the other?
Yeah, so I've had hundreds of people do this list. Like, so what's fun for me now as an author is because I have an audience, I can test the ideas before they ever hit a book. Like,
Mm.
if I didn't have an audience, what happens as an author is you have an idea in your head in your office and you go, I hope this is helpful. And you put it out. And then you find out in the market, like, ugh, it wasn't helpful. So now what I like to do is I'll have hundreds of people, real people, go through it and test it and poke holes in it so that by the time it hits a book, I don't have to guess if it's helpful. I already know this is helpful. So what happened when people went through their own best moments list, one, I would say, hey, do 30. Like just do 30. And they would end up doing 300. Like they would get on a roll and go, I noticed 4 today. I noticed, like you talk about gratefulness. Like I noticed this one. I noticed that one. The second thing would they be surprised and they'd go, oh, wow, I have 60% in this one category that I've been neglecting. Like a lot of times, especially for men, when you find something you enjoy, it's like a reunion and you forgot, like somebody will go, I forgot how much I loved mentoring. Like I didn't do it for 5 years and I don't remember the moment I stopped. Like it just sort of stopped. And then I started doing it again and it was a reunion. So what I mean by the categories is you'll have one that's more dominant than the other three. There was nobody in the research that had exactly the same number of across all of them, but there's usually one that really matters and one that doesn't matter. And you go, oh, so like if objects don't matter to you, if you've been trying to motivate yourself about like, I'm going to have a mountain house and that's going to make me work harder, and you're not able to get fired up about working harder with the vision of the mountain house, it's because that's an object and you don't care about the mountain house. Where if you say, I'm a relationship person and I want to be able to ball out with my kids, like my thing is I want to be able to take my kids to Disney. That's a relationship moment that motivates me to put in the extra hours, to sell more, whatever. Okay, I can get fired up by that. So it fits what you care about to how you actually work, which makes life so much easier.
How do you manage all of the information that's out there? Because you have some new concepts, some new ideas. We're talking about some night right now with these 4 categories. And the guys that are listening probably have listened to or read 24 different books on goal setting, goal planning. And there's some good information out there, including what's in your book and the information that you share. Like, how do you personally decipher, okay, I'm only going to implement what Jon has to say?
Yeah.
Or, here's a tidbit from Nightingale that I really enjoy, or wherever they're getting their information. I just think it becomes so overwhelming. And I think a lot of men, myself included, have a hard time implementing any of it because they're inundated with so much of it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, one is I give myself permission to not be a perfectionist when it comes to the information. I'm not going to do anybody's book perfectly. My rule is if I get one life-changing idea out of a book, it was worth the $20. So like if I go like Stephen Pressfield, War of Art, which a book we both love, when he says, anytime you go closer to something that matters, more fear pops up. If you're doing things that don't matter, fear never bothers you. Now that flipped in my mind. Fear is not a reason to stop. It's usually a flare that I'm going in the right direction. Oh, okay. I'm like, so that was a game. Like I read that book 15 years ago. I still think about that. So I wouldn't say to you, I implemented everything he said, but I would say this idea was really worth it to me. I think about, there's this woman, Colleen Berry, who told me she did a library card MBA. She started reading a bunch of books and got a library card MBA. So I kind of think of that same model of I read a bunch, but I'm never going to go 100 for 100 because that person has a different life. My problem is when a dude who doesn't have a life shaped like me, I try to implement his advice. So a silly example of that would be like drinking water. I was drinking a gallon of water a day because a dude was like, you got to drink it every day. Like was really hardcore about it. And I realized he weighs 250 pounds. He's a bodybuilder. There's a chance our bodies have different water needs than hit. I'm 150 pounds. I don't need the exact, like that would be like if he said, you got to wear a size 40 pant because that's what real men do. And I'd be like, I know it's weird, but I got to do it. This guy said it. So I would just release every man from that's listening to this from the pressure of thinking you're going to 100% implement a book. And I would instead say, read it like an a la carte menu where you pick out an idea and go, this idea fits my life. This fits my season. I talked to a dude just the other day who was like, man, I feel so much pressure because this influencer was telling me you should start every day with 90 minutes of reading. And I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And if I walk down at 5:45 when they got up and go, hey, I'll see you guys in 90 minutes. I got to go read Socrates. Like that's not going to work. So I think that like men have to take ideas from books and then test them in their life. And if they work, add another idea. And if it works, add another idea. If it doesn't work for your life, don't do those ideas. But I don't try to implement 100% of any book because it's just not how my life works.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think we need to exercise some discernment here. And I think that's what you're talking about here is realizing that the principle is more important than the specific application. I think about Jocko all the time with regards to, discipline is freedom and extreme ownership. Yeah. And you got to wake up at 4:20, bro. I love you, Jocko. I'm not waking up at 4:20. I'm not doing that. I'll wake up at 6:20. I'll wake up 2 hours later and I'll get all the things I need to get done. I'll go exercise. I'll plan my day out. I'll spend some time with the kids and I'll get after it. But if we believe that we need to wake up at 4:20 or 4:30 or 5 o'clock or whatever your thing is, and that doesn't work for your scenario, you're going to burn out. And
Dude,
that doesn't
David
serve me.
Goggins doesn't have 2 teenage daughters named Ellie and McCrae. Like he
Mm,
doesn't. Like yesterday, so we're recording this on a Thursday. On Tuesday afternoon, my oldest daughter, who's going back to college in a week, said, "Hey, can we play pickleball sometime soon before I leave?" And so I said, "Sure, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m." There's people that would say, like, "No, you got it. These are your peak hours. You got to block off, blah, blah, blah." Like, no. Like when she said, "Hey, I'd like to hang out with you," when a teenager says that to you as a dad, you're like, "Let me clear the schedule."
take advantage of it.
I played pickleball yesterday at 8 a.m. on a weekday. I took July off. I was 2 days back into the office after a month off of work. Normally that would have been like, it's go time. I got to go. And she was like, "Hey, can we play pickleball?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." I figured out how to make that happen. So yeah, I feel overwhelmed with the amount of information out there. But the thing I'd say is like, look for information that's practically true, not just technically true. And the difference is when somebody says, you should spend the first 3 hours of every day doing this program, that might be technically true. Like, yeah, you'd get further ahead if you spent 3 hours every day, but that might not be practically true for your life. Your life
Mm,
is different right now. And so, like, I try to find people that I go, I can take that. That's interesting. This is helpful. Like, I'm not Kobe. Like, when somebody goes, here's the exact like, I'm not Kobe Bryant. I'm not like, we have different lives. So for me, I'm always trying to go, okay, where does this practically fit the life I'm trying to build? And then the other problem is like, you don't know that person's whole life. Like, so when a 24-year-old who's single without kids goes, here's how to live life. And I'm a 47-year-old with 2 teenage daughters and a wife and other commitments. Like, we have different life experiences. So I should only take the pieces that fit my life.
yeah, that makes sense. One thing that I often consider too is like there's a lot of wisdom as we get older. I don't know how old you are, John. You've got a little bit more gray hair than me. I will be
Dude,
catching
a
up
little
soon.
more? Dude, come on. You're being super generous right
I'm being
now.
generous
Dude,
just in case they aren't going to be on YouTube. So,
it's the majority, dude. Like I've crossed over. I've
so I
crossed.
don't go ahead. How old are you?
I'm 47.
47. All right. So you're 5 years older than me, not a
Yeah.
lot older than me. So five
Yeah.
years older than me, and it's like we get some wisdom as we get some gray hair and we get, 4 decades under our belt.
Yeah.
Uh, and sometimes I'm tempted to say, well, that's nice for you to say because you're 60 or 70 years
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
But my
Yeah.
situation, but
Yeah.
these are things I wish I would have learned when I was 20 or 30. And I think if I would have applied them more effectively in my life, I would have had a more balanced life. And I think results would have been more favorable, even if I didn't wait until I was 42 to be able to implement some of these things.
Yeah, I think about that too. And that's why I think what you do and what I do are similar in that we do it with a sense of urgency. I don't want somebody to need to be 47 to figure these things out. Like if
Mm,
something took me 5 years and I can work really hard and put it into a book and it saves you 2 years or it saves you 18 months, like, or you put it into a podcast and you go, hey, you might not have access to this person, but because I have a podcast, I have access. And if I can extract those ideas and share them with you now, and you could be 27 and you don't have to pay the same 10-year token I paid, amazing. That's why again, the majority of podcasts don't last, but part of why yours lasts is you have a sense of urgency of, I want to help other men. And there were things that took me a long time to learn. I don't want them to have to wait. I don't want them to have to pay the same cost. How can I frame this in a way that they get it, it's consumable, and it actually changes their life right now, not 10 years from now.
well, I mean, I've even thought about that. I mentioned my divorce earlier. I've thought about that with that. Does that disqualify me? No, it actually qualifies me because I'm like, guys, don't do all the shit I did over the
Yeah.
past 2 or 3 years because here's the result. And I really, really do not want you to experience that because I did.
Yeah, and it gives you a whole audience that you have empathy for, that were an idea before now. Now there's somebody you have a 3D empathy for those people because you've gone through something that prior to that was only an idea. It was at best level a theory, and now you've experienced that in a different way, that you're going to be able to share about that, be vulnerable about that, lock arms with other dudes about that. Yeah, that you're at the start of that. Like you're a year into a long ability to share and help other people with that particular topic.
I am careful. I'm curious on this. I am careful about saying audience. I mean, that's true. We have an audience, we have a followership, a listenership, whatever you want to call it. I am cautious about that because I think it dehumanizes who we're talking with. The way I choose to look at it, and we're just debating semantics now, but the way I choose to look at it is I've got 100,000 individual conversations that I can have with guys. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm really trying to connect with one man individually because of the messages that we receive. And I know you do as well. The messages that we receive of hope and optimism, or, hey, I was in the pit of despair and I listened to this. And I'm trying to have individual conversations en masse.
Yeah, see, for me, my version of that is because of the nature of my job, I get to be around real people 50, 60 times a year when I'm at an event and somebody says, hey, here's this thing I was challenged about. Here's this. So that helps me stay grounded to there's real people involved.
Yeah.
And the best part, like somebody asked me that the other day, like, what's the best part of writing books? I think the thing I didn't understand until I did it was that my favorite thing is when I get a foreign edition in the mail. So somebody will mail me the publisher in Romania will mail me a Romanian version of my book, and some man in Romania that I might never meet in a country I've never visited, who's got similar challenges, is being encouraged by that. So that makes it an individual too, where you go, oh wow, this is, yeah, you're right. It helps it kind of keep to a one-to-one basis, not just one to many.
Right, right. So we've talked about so many different things, and some are in the book and some are not in the book. I want to get back to the book because you had mentioned about, and I'm paraphrasing here, but easing into goals, not going after the entire goal all at once. And in the chapter, the zones, or the section, the zones, you talk about easy goals, hard goals, and then you even have a section for middle goals. And I'd love you to riff on that a little bit, talk a little bit about why an easy goal versus a hard goal. Maybe some are going to motivate different people over
Yeah.
others and what that actually looks like.
So here's how I think about it. If you think about goals like a ladder, imagine you have a ladder and it's 12 feet high and there's only two rungs. Like, and there's a bottom rung and there's a top rung. And you say to somebody, you have to get to the top. And they sit there and go, okay, I've got to jump as high as I can, 12 feet high. That's 2 feet higher than a basketball rim. I have to grab it and try to pull myself up. That's what we do when we go, I've never run. I don't have any plans. I'm just going to do the Ironman. I'm signing up for the Ironman. I'm signing up for a full marathon because I read somewhere you got to go big or go home. Like, if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. Versus going, hey, here's a ladder. It has 50 rungs and I need you to get to the top of it. You'd climb to the top of that and be like, what? That was easy. They were 6 inches apart. So what I suggest is, okay, there's easy goals, middle goals, guaranteed goals. A guaranteed goal is a big goal. It is the sign up for the marathon. Like, it is sell 1 million books. It is have a successful podcast, whatever. You should have that. That's very motivational. But then you should be really deliberate about having some easy goals that are going to help you climb to the top of that so you actually do it. My big thing is I want you to actually accomplish the goal. I have failed at my job as a writer, a speaker, if I get you really motivated, but you don't accomplish the thing. Like, speaking changed for me when it stopped being a performance and turned into a work of service. Like, if you accomplish it, then I know I've done my job. So in order to do that, I teach things like, okay, say you want to write a book. A lot of men want to write a book. It's one of the most common goals in America. 83% of Americans, according to the New York Times, want to write a book.
Whoa.
So imagine if your only goal was, I want to write a book. That's a top rung goal. And imagine if that was my goal. So like today I wrote 500 words on a new book I'm working on. If I only had one finish line, I'm a failure for a solid year. Every day I don't finish the book, I'm a failure. But imagine if I have a year's worth of finish lines, and today's finish line is 500 words. Tomorrow's is call the publisher. The day after that is come up with a subtitle. I get to finish and I get a new rung every single day until I look up and all of a sudden I'm at the top of that ladder. And so that's what I encourage people to do when it comes to their goals. That's what I mean by an easy goal is you'll actually do it. You'll actually stay with it. You'll actually finish it. And so you can still have the big, wild, audacious, I want to have a $10 million business. Like, you should have that. Like, dream big, but don't think that you don't need steps in between there that are going to get you there. And that's where I think sometimes people get stuck, is they only have that very first step. I'm going to try it. And that very last step of it's going to be amazing. And they die in the middle.
You and I are very much in alignment. The nomenclature I use is tactics. So you have this goal that you want to accomplish, let's say in 12 weeks, because that's how I work. I work in
Yep.
quarterly segments. And then what I do is I break it down into daily tactics. So if I want to lose 30 pounds this quarter, then every day I'm going to spend at least 1 hour in the gym, number one, and I'm going to cut out processed sugars every day for the next 90 days. And I know that inevitably, I don't even need to worry about the result at that point. Like
Yeah.
it's
It's
done,
guaranteed. It's guaranteed, dude.
guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I do worry though sometimes, and tell me what you think about this. That for example, cutting out processed sugar. It's not that big a deal. It's not going to make a big difference if I just cut it out. If I don't stick to that today. And because we're working on these micro goals or tactics, which is the word I use, then the problem is we don't do it because it seems like it's so small that it doesn't matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Totally. It seems insignificant. And then over a 90-day period, it's very significant.
It's significant.
But in the moment, it feels like, what's the big deal? It's insignificant. Yeah. So for me, that, in a situation like that, I have to have soundtracks. So I wrote this book about mindset called Soundtracks, which are, the repetitive thoughts we listen to. So I need a really strong mindset in order to push through the moments where I feel like that. And here, the problem, in my opinion, that you're describing is people lose motivation in the middle of goals. That's just the reality. They think they're not going to. They think as soon as I find the right goal or my true north or whatever, then I'll be motivated all 90 days. No, like when we tested when people quit their goals in a 30-day goal, and the greatest drop off we saw was day two. Day two. And it's because motivation is the first thing to leave. Motivation gets flighty when real work shows up. On day one, your goal is just a dream. It's a wish. Day two, it turns into work and they don't feel motivated. So I have to do a lot of different things. I need a lot of tactics to actually push through those days where I feel like it's insignificant and I don't want to do it. So like a soundtrack that I use all the time is I'll feel awesome after. I'll feel awesome after. When I get up in the morning and I don't want to run, and it's like the joke I always do is like in Nashville, the spring is too rainy to run. The summer's too hot. The fall is too dark. The winter's too cold. There's never a good day to run. And so I don't focus on the before. I focus on the after. I go, I'll feel awesome after. That shower is going to feel amazing. Like walking down the hill when I'm done is going to feel amazing. Coming in the door is going to feel amazing. The endorphins are going to feel amazing. I'll feel awesome after. So I'll tell myself 100 times, oh yeah, I'll feel awesome after. I won't even think about the beginning because the beginning sucks. Like the cold hits your face, it's sweaty if it's summer, whatever. I'm focusing on the after, and I'm telling myself, oh, I'm going to feel awesome after. I'll feel awesome after. So I do so many different things. If I have a 90-day goal to get me to the end of that 90, I don't leave myself unguarded. I don't go, I hope this works. Like I know myself enough at 47 to be like, I need a lot of tactics, dude. I need I'm not holding my breath from day 1 to 90, hoping it works. I'm going, okay, what are the visual tactics? What are the audio tactics? Like I listen to, you said an hour a day in the gym. Like I listen to positive content so much because I'm a pessimist at heart. I'm cynical. I'm sarcastic. I'm super jaded, but I've done the ROI on positivity versus negativity, and positivity pays off so much more. So I have to work really hard at that. I can't just hope I'll be positive. So it's kind of like if somebody said that to me about, oh, well, I lose motivation a lot. It'd be like if you said you didn't eat for 3 days in a row and then you're like, it's so weird that I'm hungry. I'd be like, no, it's not. You didn't eat. Like if you didn't feed yourself positivity and motivation all day, and worse, you fed yourself social media and negativity and trolls, whatever. No wonder you're having a hard time with the goal. So like, that's where if somebody said that to me and they were willing to take some feedback, that's what I would say is like, well, let's get you more tools. Let's get you more tactics. Like you don't have, like, you should, when somebody's like, oh, that's a crutch. I'm like, yeah, I'm not, like, you live in Utah. I love to ski in Salt Lake. Like every time I see somebody get taken down the mountain and they're in that like little like sled and they're all right, like that's how I'm trying to do that to myself. I need that many tools. Like I want it to be like I'm riding down the mountain. So I'm not going to wait to hope in the middle of the goal I stay strong. I'm going to totally prepare, like overwhelming action, overwhelming motivation so that it is a guarantee.
Well, I see this in the hunting world. I'm a relatively new hunter. I've been hunting for about 7-ish years, 7, 8 years or so now. And I've actually had people, I'll post a picture of an animal I've shot or, a hunt I've been on, and people are like, well, it's easy when you have a rifle. I'm like, yeah, of course it is. Cause I don't want to go hunting with a, like a, what do you call that? I can't even think of what it's called.
Slingshot?
Like a slingshot or throwing a
or
rock.
A rock. Yeah. A rock is really hard. Like, I'm glad we invented those. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, look, it would be cool. And maybe at one point, like when I have 20 years under my belt, I might be able to do something like that. But for now, yeah, I'll take the compound bow over the rock. Yeah. Of course I will.
So for me, the thing that people say to me that I always kind of push back on is where they go, must be nice, must be nice. And I always would be like, it is. And I'm trying to teach you how to do it. Like, if you say it must be nice, if I say this happened and they go, oh, it must be nice, I say, it is really nice. That's why I shared it. I would love you to experience that niceness too. Can I show you how I did it? And if they go, no, then fine. Don't, like, you're not my people. But if I say, like, books aren't impossible. Like, I'll turn in my 10th book in a couple weeks. I really love writing books, and I figured it out. It's really hard for me. It's not like it's easy. It's really still challenging, but I figured out how to do it. And if you want to figure out how to do it too, cool. Here's the steps. Like, this is the work. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But just don't criticize me that it must be nice to have a book come out, because, well, it is nice.
Like, it is nice. I've worked my tail off to make it happen.
Yeah, I'd love that to happen for you too. Let's figure that out together. But if you don't want the advice, then don't waste your time. Like, I always tell people, happy, busy people don't have time for hate. Like, happy, busy people don't have time to hate on others. Like, I don't have time for trolling right now because I'm writing books and I'm, playing pickleball with my kids who want to be around me. Like, that's a huge win as a dad. Like, that your kid, like, talk about a goal, like, that your kid texts you and goes, hey, can we spend more time together? Like, I'm having too much fun to worry about criticism.
Well, I've even had people say, if I delete somebody or block somebody or whatever it might be on social media, like, oh, well, you don't see conflicting voices. I'm like, no, I do. I just don't see assholes. Like, I would never invite a dickhead into my house and say, oh, it's for, diversity of thought. I'm like, no, I'm not interested in that diversity. I'm not interested in that. So no, that person's not coming into my house, and certainly I'm not going to let them into my life, let alone social media.
No, one thing my wife always says is, she says, criticism that costs nothing is worth nothing. So when somebody writes something mean to you in a comment that costs them 30 seconds, it's worth 30 seconds. That's it. When a friend who loves you pulls you aside and says, hey, there's this thing I see in your life, I think you need to change it. That took bravery, that took courage, that took awkwardness. That's worth a lot. So, like, I don't make a lot of time for criticism that costs nothing. Like, I'm not, like, the idea of, like, diversity of thought. Like, no, I'm good. I'm good. Like, I get a lot of that in my real relationships. Like, I get a lot of that, like, where people who think different than me, vote different than me, whatever. I get a lot of that in real life. I'm not looking for extra of that from strangers on the internet. Like, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. One of the things you talked about with the soundtracks is, you said, I'm just going through my notes here. You said, I'll feel awesome after. One thing that I use is, it counts more if it's not enjoyable. Like, and I don't know if that's always the most helpful, but it counts more if it's hard.
Well, my version of that is the hills pay the bills. Like, when I have a hill that I have to run, the hills are my friends. I change it to that because I'm like, that hill is eliminating competition. That hill is preparing me for the next hill. So this hard thing, like, hills pay the bills, hills pay the bills. Like, I'm not, like, if I run the same hill in North Carolina again and again and again, it prepares me for a half marathon in Nashville. Then I remember, like, oh, that hill was my friend. Like, it was hard. And then I think of that, like, I think it's Alistair Humphreys wrote a book about micro adventures, and he calls it type 2 fun. There's type 1, which is, like, easy and casual. And he's like, type 2 is where it's at, where it's grueling. You're sleeping in a tent, like, it's rainy. You're on a hunt that's challenging, whatever. It's type 2 fun. And he's like, type 1 fun is great. Don't get me wrong. But type 2 is where you're like, ooh, that had a level of satisfaction to it. Like, this is such a silly example, but I remember the first time I ever played ultimate Frisbee. I had never played and thought, I've been around Frisbees. Like, I've seen dogs catch them. How hard could this be? Dude, you don't stop running. Like, you run 100 yards and then somebody drops a Frisbee. You run 100 yards back. I threw up the first time I played. Like, I was a mess. And I remember that feeling of driving away with my roommate, and I was exhausted but elated. So I love that feeling where I find something where I'm exhausted but elated, where I know, like, I emptied out my ability. Man, that was worth it. Like, man, that was worth it.
I like that. I like that concept of the hills pay the bills, because I've even thought about it with my little mantra of, it counts more if it's hard. If I really buy into that, literally buy into that, I will do hard things that don't actually move the needle just because they're hard. So I want to be very cautious on the verbiage I'm using and the scripts that I'm
Yeah.
living my life by, because I'm not interested in making things harder than they need to be, except for in training or this type 2 fun you're talking about.
Yeah, you're not doing it for inefficiency. It would be harder for you to write me a letter to get the information for your podcast. That would be technically harder, but it's a lot easier if you email me, and that's fine that that's easy. So yeah, you're always kind of, I think that's important, that you're always balancing the things you're saying to yourself, the ways you're living, and who you're letting speak into that. Like what, who are you obviously who are you surrounding yourself with? What are their soundtracks? The more I'm deliberate about, that was a big lesson for me in the last 5 years, is how powerful my thoughts are and how I can change them and what happens when I actually change them.
One thing you talk in the book about, and I'm very curious about the subject, and I think a lot of guys will be as well, is this concept of a scorecard
Yeah.
and making sure that you're keeping score, making sure that you're tracking, because I think it's easy to deceive ourselves. I think the greatest risk in goal setting, that is to believe that we're further down the path or we're doing more than we actually are. That's been my experience personally, anyways, and experience with the thousands of guys that we've worked with.
Yeah. So a big thing for me is, unless you're keeping score, you have no idea. You have no, like, the phrase I like to use is that data kills denial, which prevents disaster. Data kills denial, which prevents disaster. So data is just trying to tell you the truth. Like, here's what's happening. Here's how many hours you put into that project. Here's how many follow-ups you did. Here's how many cold calls you did. Here's how many times you ran. So like, I'll show you. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm holding up a picture. This is my scorecard. It says August actions on it. And I'm scoring myself on 6 or 7 different items I'm trying to track. And some are physical, some are intellectual, some are relationship, some are my work. So for me, what I like about a scorecard is it tells you the truth when fear tries to lie to you. Because on the flip side, fear will go, you're not really doing that much. Like, you're not really working that hard. One of the things I like to think about is the only solution I've found to imposter syndrome is results. Like, results are the only thing in my life that have killed imposter syndrome. What I mean by that is, if imposter syndrome tries to tell me that I'm not a real writer, I go, oh, that's weird, because there's 9 books on the shelf. This one is
Right.
translated in German. Like, I feel like you might have bad information. Like, I've written a lot of books. So for me, that's what a result can be. It can be a finished book, but it can also be a daily checklist where you go, I did the thing today. Like, I put in the effort. I'm getting the thing. Like, it was worth it. One of the silly goals I did was I wanted to encourage one person every day for 30 days in a row, a different person. And so I kept a list of that. I kept their names. I checked it off. And I saw amazing results. Like, there wasn't a single person who responded to me. I was like, I wish you hadn't have told me that today. This was such a bad time for you to encourage me. Most of them said the reverse. They said, you have no idea how much I needed that today. And it was a 30-second text message. But again, instead of taking this fuzzy thing, like, I want to be a better friend, that's a fuzzy, vague thing you can't operate against. There's no tactics. I said, okay, I'm going to try to encourage 30 people, 30 friends, and I'm going to make a list, and I'm going to have a checkbox. I'm going to send a text message every morning. And that's what it's going to be. Like, I could track that, and I could say, wow, I encouraged 27 people this month out of 30. That's pretty good. Maybe I can get to 28 next month. Maybe the thing you have to remember is, you'd never run a marathon if you didn't know the finish line. That would be the worst. The other thing is, like, if you got into a car with somebody and they're like, hey, we're going to go on vacation. And you're like, where? And they're like, the beach. You'd be like, well, which beach? And if they were like, no, just don't worry about it, just the beach. You'd be like, no, like, where are we going? How are we getting there? You'd want to know the score. Am I making progress? Your brain is desperate to know if you're making progress. And that's where I feel like we don't talk about enough. Comparison to me is your brain just looking at somebody else's scorecard, because you're not giving your brain one. Your brain wants to know, how are we doing? Are we the type of men we want to be? Are our families the type of families we want to have? Are our career, whatever? How are we doing? And if you don't have a scorecard that matters to you, you'll start to compare other people's scorecard to your life. And that's where, like, oh, there's so much unhappiness in that. Or you'll judge, like you'll judge your life based on the wrong things. Like the world will give you a scorecard unless you build your own. Like it'll give you one and go, here's the things that are important. And then, dude, that's when you wake up at 50 and go, wow, I chased a lot of things that did not matter. And I didn't know they didn't matter because I didn't have my own scorecard. And so for me, that's where I could maybe work, 80 hours a week and do some like 100 hours a week, whatever it is. But that's not my scorecard. My scorecard involves my family, involves my health. Like I need to make time for a bunch of different things. And I can have a healthy scorecard because it's the Jon Acuff scorecard. The last thing I'll say, speaking of scorecards, I read 100 books one year and I would post about them. And there were people that were like, that book doesn't count. Like, a Batman graphic novel doesn't count, or audiobooks don't count, or whatever. And I would go, that's weird, because I thought this was the Jon Acuff personal reading challenge. And I'm Jon Acuff. So if there's somebody who can decide I feel like it's me. I had my scorecard. If I want to listen to an audiobook, that counts. Like if you want to have your scorecard be different, go for it. This is mine. And so I think that's where it's important for men to have that established, because other people will vocally try to give you one unless you have your own.
Yeah, I think we fall into the trap of, I don't know, what do you think about sharing goals? If you start to share goals, people start to, like you're saying, quantify them, qualify them, tell them you're doing good. That's actually a trap. I've seen it on Facebook.
Some, not all. I share some, not all. You did a podcast on that, right? What was your like your key thought there?
Well, I think the most important thing, and you kind of qualified this a little bit earlier. I think it's important to share your goals with people who care about you and are going to be honest with you. But people who don't know you, or people who aren't going to be honest with you, why are you sharing your goal? The trap, I think one of the traps is, I could post on Facebook today. Like I go on right after this call and say, hey, I'm going to run a marathon. And I'll have 100 people plus write a comment and say, you're awesome. You're amazing. Way to go. I'm like, well, hold on. I haven't done anything yet. Yeah. All I did was post a few characters on a computer. I haven't actually done anything yet. And the risk in that is getting accolades for actually no work whatsoever.
Dude, you are 100% right. Derek Sievers talked about this. He referenced a study from the 1930s by a guy named Kurt Lewin, where when that happens, your body releases dopamine, the pre-congratulations, and it's enough that you get satisfied and don't actually do the activity. So the same thing works with books. So if you go to a dinner party and you tell somebody, I'm writing a book, they go, you're so brave.
You
must
amazing.
be so disciplined. You're amazing. You haven't written a single page yet. You're already getting congratulations. Your body goes, hey, that's enough. That's enough dopamine. Thanks.
Amazing.
You don't even, I am amazing. You don't write it. So yeah, I think that's the other thing, is that like, don't share, like if a goal is challenging to you, share it with people you trust, not with everybody, because if you share it publicly and people criticize you, now you've added criticism to an already difficult challenge. I don't need extra reasons to not do the goal. So if I have some goal that I want, like I might share it after and go, hey, here's something I worked on, because it might inspire somebody else. But if I'm already struggling with it, I'm not going to share it broadly. I'm going to share it with my running group. I'm going to share it with, some accountability partners. I'm going to share it with a group of men I trust, not with everybody. Like, cause it's too valuable and too special and too fragile. Like that's the other thing. I don't share everything with people until it's got enough strength to stand up on its own. If it's a fragile goal, I'm not sending it out to the wilds of the internet. Like, no, I want that thing to be like, oh, you don't think I can do this? Here's the first 30 days. I'm already in motion. Like that thing has some muscles now and might be able to stand up to the internet. I'm not sending fragile goals out into the internet.
Yeah. I just pulled this up because I think this is right in line with what we're talking about. It's this is the King James version of Matthew 7:6. It says, give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. It's like, why would I take something that's valuable to me and give something that's so important to me and cast it before somebody who wants to treat it like complete garbage?
And is never going to buy your thing or support your thing. Like, that's not the person. Like, it kind of be like if somebody was complaining about a meal they didn't eat. Like, you didn't come to my restaurant. Like, what? Like, no, like, you know who a chef shouldn't care about? The person who's never been to their restaurant. They should care about the person that's like, I'm a big fan of Italian. I've had your Italian. Here's what I think. Like, that's completely different. But I think I think we have to remember the internet is still pretty new and we're still figuring it out. Like it's a toddler still. Like 100 years from now, people are going to study the time we live in right now and be like, man, that was crazy when they first got the internet.
It
We're
must
the
have been
first
hard.
ones. That must have been hard. They didn't know about like all the damage. Like there's also not going to be a study in 100 years from now that says it was good for our self-esteem. Like there's just
Yeah.
not going to be one where like doctors are
Good
like,
call.
yeah, strangers hating on other people ended up being really healthy. It turns out it was like, that was good. Like, no. And so that's where like finding your people, finding your tribe as it were, and like leaning into that, that matters. The general doesn't matter.
Well, Jon, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're busy right now with a new book and the launch and the tour that you're doing with All It Takes Is a Goal. Let the guys know where to connect with you,
Sure.
how to pick up a copy of the book, and where to go from here.
Yeah. So you can find me at jonacuff.com, just jonacuff.com. I've got a podcast called All It Takes Is a Goal, where I interview people about their goals. If you listen to one episode, Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, and I mean football, not finances, he was amazing on that. To hear him talk about leading this billion-dollar organization and how he approaches goals and runs marathons and read books was really inspiring to me as a man. You can get the book anywhere books are sold, and I read the audiobook. If you're an audio person, I read the audiobook. We put 10 bonus stories in it. It's super fun. So yeah, you can check that out anywhere books are.
Awesome. Thanks, Jon. I
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks,
you.
dude. This was fun.
I know it's been years since we've connected, but you're an integral part of the work that we're doing, whether you know it or not, especially in the early years. So really appreciate you coming on, tuning in, and having a conversation with us. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a blast, man. Thanks.
All right, brother. That's a wrap.
Super easy. All right. Well, I'll text you my cell phone. And then, yeah, if you're, I come to Salt Lake probably like 2 or 3 times a year for events.
Let me know, man. I'll make it up. And I've got other reasons to be there, but to see you would be really cool, and to shake hands and
fun,
spend some
dude.
time together would be awesome.
Let's get, I think we'd be able to encourage each other, inspire each other, trade tactics as it works. So
No
I'd
doubt.
be all up for that. Expect a text from me in a little while, man. See you,
All right,
buddy.
brother. Have a good one.
You too.